Hello and welcome to the School Leadership Show. I am here with my very energetic co-host, Mike Dowdy. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Jen.
And we have a very special guest today who already Mike has threatened to take over the conversation and make it all about him and his career trajectory. But you'll get that in just a moment. Today we have Will Parker joining us. I actually first heard of Will Parker many years ago when I was researching like the top 10 education leadership podcasts for subscribers of the Main Idea, and I found his podcast. Principle Matters and listen to it. And it's an excellent mix of both practical advice and inspiration for school leaders. So listen to his podcast. And then I learned more about him. Will has been a longtime educator in Oklahoma since 1993, starting as a teacher, then a school leader. Then eventually he ran the entire Oklahoma Association of Secondary School Principals, as well as the Oklahoma Middle Level Education Association. And now I think about 2 years, Will, he's been
Yeah.
full-time everything consultant. He speaks, he coaches leaders, he teaches leaders, he writes books, he runs masterminds like I do, all in the name of serving leaders. So I summarized his earlier book, Messaging Matters, and now he has a new book. And I also just got to meet Will in person at a wonderful SAM conference where we were both presenting, and it was great. And it's just wonderful to have you here to join Mike and me on the show. So welcome, Will.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to be with the two of you. I admire your both of your works and thank you for bringing me on the podcast. And we were just celebrating off the air the the New York power that's in this room with the two of you. And I have had a chance to work with Sanies a little bit this year, doing some virtual work with them. And in fact, Karen Borchert there and I have been talking about the possibility of me coming up there in the fall. So we'll see if I'm in your neck of the woods. I'll let you guys know.
That
I
would be
love it.
great.
And for people who don't know, SANES is the School Administrators Association of New York State. So if you're a school administrator in New York, you definitely know what SANES is. So cool that you're
Yeah,
doing some work with them. Well, they're a great group.
they
Yeah,
are. It's a privilege.
come join us. We'd love to see you in person.
Mhm.
So you have a new book out, and it's called Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love.
Mhm.
And when I first picked it up, I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be about, but it turns out that it is a great book to help you think through career options or even just get yourself out of a rut and reconnect to your joy as an educator. So I was expecting a whole bunch of career advice in this book, but one of the things that I got out of this book, Will, is that you're just like a shining role model of a person. You're a lovely human being. There are all these fantastic anecdotes about your daughter, your wife, about going sailing, and you seem so grounded and reflective that I think that anybody should read this book just to learn a little bit more about you. What, Mike, you're putting your
Wait,
hand.
wait, hang on a second. Now you got to go to this one. Where does one sail in Oklahoma?
Well, Mike, I have a really good friend who has a sailboat off the coast of Maryland, and so in that chapter, I get to tell that story. But I love to travel, so you're going to find in that book all kinds of stories about times on farms and sailing and hiking the coastal path in Wales, and so travel is a big part of my love.
And a good reminder how important it is to be balanced and have something other
Mhm.
than school and leadership work in your life. So that's great. But yeah, so this is a different book than one that I would normally summarize. We would talk about where you're really, trying to provide some guidance to people who may want to, shift a little bit in their education career. So can you tell a little bit about like why did you write this book and what
My
you hope
gosh,
people will get out of it?
Jen, thank you for your like such a you're so generous. But so let's rewind like I don't know 25 years ago, and my entire career as an educator, teaching, administration, and even the work I do now, I always feel like I'm prepping for something else. Like I'm loving what I do, but I'm always thinking about, well, 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And if you could have gone back 25 years ago, I was looking for this book. I found myself constantly thinking about, well, what is next, or what's this pathway and this journey look like? So, I would find books on careers or self-help or business entrepreneurship or just name it. There's all kinds of stuff out there, but when I finally stepped into this work full time, consulting 2 years ago, um, I was coaching a lot of, and I still am coaching a lot of leaders. And I'm just going to say, when I say high achieving leaders, people that reach out to me because they're already at the top of their field and they really want to get better. And the crazy thing is that in those conversations, I find myself answering a lot of the same questions, even from high performing leaders. And not always, but it seems like inevitably I get to the place with someone too where they're at a crossroads and they're trying to decide in their own career or in their own life, um, that next thing. But then sometimes it's just a crossroads in their leadership. Like there's something that needs to change and they need to kind of know which way to go. And so I just found myself kind of in these circles of conversations over and over and over again. And all of my previous books have been a result of when I find myself saying the same thing over and over again, and I haven't already written a book about it, it's time to write that book. And so this book was really born from the coaching. It was born from these are those crucial conversations I keep having over and over again. So gosh, more than 3 years ago. I guess when I first stepped into the work and was doing it full time, I just sat down one day and just started brain dumping. What are the major themes I keep touching on? And I came up with 20 of them, which became the content for this book. And so it was a labor of love to try to write and coach and all the other things I'm doing at the same time, because I also do a podcast like you guys. But it's that's where it was born from, Jen, because so many of the lessons I've learned through my own path and journey I'm able now to go, looking back now, this is a gift, I hope, to younger educators, but also to my peers, because there are things that are still helping me in my own decision making.
Well, I think it's really timely because I think a lot of us are hearing about educators who want to shift a little something in their careers. And also, it can be tough in our field in particular to stay in education for the long haul because we don't seem to have that same career ladder that a lot of other professions have. Like you might
Right.
enter as a middle school teacher and 40 years later, you're a middle school teacher, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll be a department chair, right? And even if you do decide to become an assistant principal or principal, it's really a different job. It's not necessarily, moving up in the same type of ladder. So, you have a chapter on avoiding the binary and
Mm.
how educators can open up ideas for themselves when there's not always a clear path. So, what do you say to that? Principal who's been in the position for 40 years and doesn't really see so clearly the next step. It's like either I'm a superintendent or I'm retired, or so explain a little bit more about avoiding the binary.
Yeah, well, avoiding the binary for me and pathway thinking, they're companions. So there's probably two chapters that I cover on those. But um, this has just been a really helpful idea to keep in mind that so often when we're facing a really difficult decision, and I'm thinking back to my own years, even as a young administrator, a lot of times you're expecting things to be very black and white, which we know they're not, or we're expecting that we can make a choice between two really good options. But sometimes it's a good option and a bad option. But what I've discovered with leaders is a lot of times you've got decisions between sometimes which is the best option. But it was, I don't even know where this thinking began for me. There was a really good book by Dave Evans and Bill Burnett called Designing Your Life. And I mentioned this in the book as well. And they were design engineering professors at Stanford University who, while working with really talented students, ran into the same things with these high achieving kids that we run into with everybody we know, which is they were getting degrees in design engineering and still wondering, what am I supposed to do next? And so their professors, Evans and Burnett, decided to create an elective course for students on designing your life. And so they use the same design engineering ideas for helping them to think about multiple pathway options in front of you that you could beta test in order to identify potential goals, look at possible solutions, talk to people who may be experts in those potential pathways, and look for open doors within them. And the key is not to think about one or two potential pathways. The key is to think of three or four, is to give yourself the permission to begin to navigate looking at more than just the binary. This is not a decision between this and this. Let's look at the decision between A, B, or C, or even D. what the reason that book resonated with me is because when I came across that idea and I first found them online and then I bought the book, I looked across the walls of my office, excuse me, and I laughed because I was doing it already. I had all these huge post-its where I had different pathways up in front of me where I was exploring different things that I was working on and doing, and I would iterate them. So the idea of avoiding the binary is recognizing that most of the time when you have a decision in front of you, a lot of times it's not between A and B, or maybe it is only because you've put that limit in your mind. And so there's something really eye-opening when you start asking yourself the question, is there a potential C or D here that I'm not even thinking about? And so in careers, a lot of times that question could be, okay, what's the potential pathway that you're on right now that could lead to something else you may enjoy doing right where you are? You don't even have to move. Maybe it's a promotion. Maybe it's just an increasing of something you enjoy doing there. B would be, what's something really logical that could be a shift that's not too far from where I'm at, but could be a logical next thing. C could be something like, what if I had to completely change directions I'm going, but maybe it's connected to my skills, my gift sets, the things that I love to do. But my favorite one is to ask the question, what if you could create a pathway for yourself where fear of failure was off the table? What would you do then? And boy, you talk about expanding your mind. And so really what you're doing when you avoid the binary and you give yourself permission to think in terms of pathways is you're giving yourself the permission to do what you did as kids, to create playgrounds for the potentials that are in front of you, and then begin to explore them systematically until you find the openings and the possibilities that usually are just waiting for you to find them once you start down those paths. So it's not magic. I'm not trying to, this is not a book that's trying to give people some formula for decision making or career projections, but what I've tried to do is just teach the things that have helped me in my own journey, and I've seen help others.
So it's interesting that you say that because I think we almost as educators need that kind of framework because if you've been an educator for your entire career, and I have this conversation with people all the time, like I don't know what somebody who works in business does because I've never done anything other than
Yeah.
basically be in school.
Mhm.
So, how do you get people to broaden their perspective? I mean, I think every time I go visit a career in tech ed class, I talk to the kids and I'm like, you know what? You'll never want for work. You can cut hair, or you can cook, or you can fix a
Yeah.
car. I lose my job, I have no discernible skills. So how do you get people to see that what they're doing, it has the potential to be desirable in other fields or maybe within education, but in different ways.
Well, I think a part of that is remaining curious. I have this little equation that I call, inquiry plus curiosity plus inquiry equals discovery. And so, who was it? I'm not going to quote this person correctly because it's, this just came to my mind, but I can't remember who said it. So but I heard someone once say, I think it was like a musician who once said that, creative people are the creative adults are the ones who survive childhood. So because we beat creativity out of kids, and so by the time they get to a certain age, they quit asking questions, they quit dreaming, they quit being so curious. And I don't know why. I'm not going to blame it on education or the system or whatever, but I'll just say that all of us are born with this like insatiable curiosity. Eh, So why do we not get to keep doing that as we grow? And so, Mike, when I think about like potentials, you don't have to even travel now to explore your curiosities. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. One, when I was an when I was a teacher and was getting my master's degree to become a school admin, I was taking a course, and probably on capital management or school funding or something. But I had never done anything but teaching. So so trying to study school funding was just so like it was a tough thing for me to take in. So one day I was on my planning period at school and I just had this little thought. I was like, what do they do at payroll? What do they do at the central office? So you know what I did? I went to central office on my planning period. I didn't even call. I just walked in and said, would it be okay for me to talk to somebody in payroll? And they're like, okay. So they got me back to payroll and I went back there and she probably thought I was upset with my check or something. And I was just like,
Because nobody's showing up to tell those folks
yeah,
they're doing a
yeah. So
great job.
I was just like, hey, I'm just curious. How do you do payroll? And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, have a seat. And so she starts pulling out all her stuff. And it was the first time I had ever sat and watched what someone did to pay me. And so for Mike, I'm just like, so maybe it's just will, but I think that I didn't get in trouble for being curious. And I certainly learned a lot from being curious. And then later, when I'm doing the work of other people getting paid, well, that I'm managing, I had a better sense of what's going on down there. And so that's just one example. And another example is when I started podcasting. I was already writing a blog like 12 years ago. And then, but I started listening to podcasts and I was like, man, these are so fun. How do you do that? And so I went online and started watching, like Pat Flynn had a 6-part How Do You Podcast series on YouTube. And I watched it, and over Christmas break, I sat down and I took notes and I followed it step by step by step by step by step. And I published my first podcast, just as afraid as everything in the world that someone would hear it and judge me. But that curiosity just led me to, let's go figure it out and let's find it out. So I probably am like that really annoying person though at like people's parties too, because I always try to find the person who does something I don't know how to do. And I just like, I want to find out what it takes. So, but I just want to invite listeners to think about giving yourself permission to pursue the curiosity, because there's nothing people enjoy more than when you call them and ask them, how do you do what you do? People love to talk about what they do. So in the book by Burnett and Evans, and I'm probably going to talk more about their book than mine, they encourage people to, when you are identifying potential pathways and you're trying to create some ideas of what to do next, identify experts within the fields that you're most interested in and just find out how to message them and ask them, could I sit in a room with you for 30 minutes, or could we have a coffee, or could we do a Zoom? And just ask them those questions. Can you tell me what you do and what you've learned from what you do? And people love to answer those questions.
I want to build on that. And it's absolutely not because you're annoying that you are curious and ask all these questions. But I think Mike is right, not just about adults, but young, but older kids too, that you don't choose a career path by sitting in your room and, diving into the recesses of your mind and imagining, oh, I know what an investment bank. I'm going to imagine, do I want to be an investment banker or right? I think it is. Yes, by what you're describing, being curious and reaching out to experts or watching YouTube videos at this point. But, you also describe sort of a very methodical, like, get your feet wet, and you describe some actual actions. Get out. Don't just sit there in your room, but you talk about piloting, shadowing, volunteering. Can you share some of these ideas so that people, while they have their full-time jobs and their benefits and everything, what else can they be doing in addition to reaching out to experts?
Well, to me, this is the difference between idea and action, and that's intentionality. So if you're curious about something and you really want to see it move from your curiosity to the potential for momentum to be built, you got to do something. And so for me, most of the time when I'm when I'm coaching others that want to pursue action, give yourself some achievable goals. So maybe once a week, you're going to give yourself permission for 30 minutes or an hour of exploration and curiosity and looking into something or researching someone. Or maybe that same time a week, you're giving yourself permission to reach out to 4 or 5 people that are experts in that thing, and just send them an email or a text or a social media message and ask them, would it be okay if we had some feedback? Set it on your calendar, some milestones for, by this time I will have learned this, or I would have reached out to this many people. I tell a story about a good friend of mine, Nick Davies, who's an assistant principal in Vancouver, Washington. And he called me a couple of years ago because he was kind of curious about what I do. And he was asking me questions. And he just finished his PhD, and he was kind of like, man, well, I've got this. I devoted all this time to finish this degree, and now I still have this time available. How can I best maximize it? And so I said, well, how about doing what you're doing right now? Like just keep reaching out to people that you want to learn from. Well, he's not stopped. I had an email from him today, and it's like his 65th person that he's reached out to because he'll summarize every conversation that he has with them, and he posted on LinkedIn. And so he's just on this journey of learning because every time he calls somebody that does something he's curious in, he learns something new. And as a result, I think it was last year. I know he's done this more than once. He's been presenting at national conferences on things I'm learning from calling leaders. And so because it's become something that's a passion for him and other people want to know what he's learning. So those are just some practical things to keep in mind.
Well, also, you mentioned achievable goals, and you were talking about, like, for the week or for your calendar, but you tell a nice anecdote in the book about going to a church dinner and meeting a man in his 20s who had already begun achieving some of his goals. And you said, doesn't it feel good to reach some of your goals? And he turned to you as a mid-career
Yeah.
person, I guess you were mid-career, and said, okay, how about you? What are your goals for the next 5 to 10 years? And you didn't have an answer for him. So
Yeah, that was
can you
such
talk
a
a little bit about, goal setting at this point when we are in the mid or the twilight, wherever we are of our career, and still setting goals? And also, can you talk about the role of reflection in helping to set those goals?
no, thanks for that story, Jen. That was a crazy and painful moment because, gosh, I'm probably young, mid 40s. I'm already, I'm an administrator. I'm a young dad. Finished all these things, all these milestones I had set for myself. And so he's 20 years younger than me, and he's telling me all these things he's currently doing. And I'm like, yeah, way to go. Doesn't it feel good? Bought his first house, started a new business. And I was like, I remember when we were achieving our goals when we, back in the day, and he's like, oh, that's great. So what do you plan for the next 5 or 10 years? And I was just like, to be honest, I'm just trying to survive. It's just all I can say. I'm just trying to survive. And so when he walked away, I was haunted by that. I was like, I haven't said it like I've achieved this thing in my mid-career, but I haven't been thinking about what's next. So, um, whatever you can call it, coincidence or providence. But a few days later, our church was hosting an event for like a men's retreat. And it's the only time I've ever been on an event like this. I don't know why we haven't done it since because it was so meaningful. But we were given a day to start off together with breakfast and some study. But then we were just kind of sent out on our own for the afternoon with some reflection questions. Just spend the day reflecting, praying, whatever. And those questions, I've just held on to them, and because I do this every year for myself now, which are questions, and I'll just share them with listeners. But when's the last time you sit down and just reflected on what were the major milestones you've experienced in this past year? What were the things you could say were your greatest celebrations as you look back? What were the greatest challenges that you faced over the past year? And what were the lessons learned from those simple reflections? And then after reflecting back, then start looking forward. What are some goals that you would love to achieve for yourself? And let's just fill in the gaps physically, spiritually, relationally, vocationally. I mean, and you could just keep listing them. But by setting goals, then you give yourself permission then to imagine the possibilities of where you want to go next. But then, and this is the part where the educator kicked in for me, like how do you make them smart goals? How do you actually make those things achievable, measurable goals that you can put on your calendar and say, these are things that I want to try to accomplish throughout the year. So if you look at the front of I'm taking notes as we talk, but in the very front of my notebook, the first thing that I do, and if I fill one up, I always do this first, is I write in all of my goals for the calendar year in front of me that I've set. And these aren't necessarily professional goals, but they're goals for my mind, my body, my spirit, my money, my love, my family, my hobbies, my work. And those are the things that I review on a regular basis so that I can be giving myself permission to achieve the next thing. And this isn't about like perfectionism. It's not and this may not be a formula that works for other people or a practice that helps them, but just to bring it back to a word you said, Jen, the power of reflection. Oh, who was my friend that said this? I'm going to misquote someone if I don't get this right. It was Pete Hall who said, I once heard say, And he's a really great educator and writer. But he said, experience is not the best teacher. Reflecting on your experiences is the best teacher. And so there's something that powerful that happens when we pause and we give ourselves permission to purposely reflect so that we can then set goals for those things that we want to do next.
And I think to that point, Will, I think it's very growth mindset too,
Mhm.
because I think there are people who sort of naturally reflect and it's just part of the way they think. And there's other people who do something and move on and never think about it again. But when prompted, with some sort of framework like you're suggesting, they're able to make those connections between what happened and what might happen. And
Yeah.
I think I think that gets lost on a lot of people who are like, ah, okay, yeah, that's over. Let's just move right on.
No, I'm so glad you said that because, when Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset came out, it was such, everybody was talking about it because we knew as educators that it works. You know, when we're working with a kid who struggles in math and he's telling himself or herself, I'm not good at math. But you can say, well, maybe you're not good at solving this problem yet. Let's get there. That whole growth mindset piece plays into permission to learn something that maybe you're scared to try or learn. And why don't we do that for ourselves? Why don't we give ourselves permission to just keep expanding and growing? So I think for educators, especially, and I'm not trying to say this, we're recording this in May, so everybody's exhausted this time of year, but but if we are truly committed to the work of education, we've got to be truly committed to our own. How can we inspire other people to learn if we're not constantly like looking for that next thing or curious or discovering the thing that's keeping us wanting to be a student? I don't know how we can lead students if we're not staying students. And reflection is a big part of that.
And I want to push back a little bit, Mike. I was just reading a book. I think you interviewed him, Will, so you probably know how to pronounce his name. Baruti Kafele.
Yes. Mhm.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I was just reading his book, and he was actually really arguing for reflecting by writing stuff down, not just in that commute home from work,
Mhm.
because he said it's really by looking back and seeing the patterns of, what happened in September, what was I thinking in October, no, that you see the patterns and they help you, whatever it is, whether you're improving your school or you're making a big move for yourself professionally. He really argued for that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I love Burrito
Will,
Cafe.
what were you going to say?
No, I love him. He's got such great work, but he's so right.
He is right. So Will, we keep talking, you keep using this word permission, and it is the title of your book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? And you say the chapter that is named, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? Chapter 6 is the heart of the book.
Mhm.
So, you suggest that perhaps in some cases we are the biggest obstacle to making the change that we want to see, whether that's professionally or schools, but here you're talking professionally. Can you talk about how it is that we might be our biggest barriers and what you mean by whose permission?
Yeah, it's so hard to recreate this moment um in a conversation. So I'll just try to recreate it just let's imagine you're having a conversation. So a lot of times, especially when I'm coaching leaders and I'm sitting in a room or a Zoom and they're sharing that thing that's on their mind, and then they're sharing that thing that's really on their mind. Because usually what I've discovered is leaders will share the surface thing first, and then after a while they'll say, okay, this is really what I'm challenged with. Once they've identified what that real challenge is, and then they identify what they really believe is what they want as a solution. Because a lot of times when I'm reflecting with leaders, it's that question, what is it that you really want? Or I've heard some people say, if you can wave a magic wand, what would be the outcome that you want? When they can identify and then explain the outcome that they want, then they begin to see potential solutions. And so I can't tell you how many times I've sat with a leader who suddenly has that light bulb where they recognize what they want or what they know needs to happen next. And then I'll be able to say, well, whose permission are you waiting for that to happen? And they recognize the only person's permission they're waiting for is their own. Because when you can imagine the possibilities and you can see the potential of something that's getting ready to happen, there are times where you may have an obstacle that's not you. It could be a system, it could be a person, it could be a permission, it could be an authority structure, it could be geography. It could be lack of degree. People, we can come up with a lot of excuses for why we can't do something. And I'm probably pushing really hard on this in this chapter, but what I would like to say to leaders is, you don't need anybody's permission to keep learning or to take the next step or to experience that thing that's going to bring you joy. There's so much that we can do right where we are, whether it's helping a student or helping someone on our team or building towards that next thing that doesn't require anybody else's permission. I think, and this is probably because I had to overcome this kind of mindset growing up. I grew up in I had wonderful parents. We grew up on a farm, but both my parents without any advanced degrees. My dad did not finish high school, finished his GED, went in the military. Loving family. But I also had a lot of limits, like in my own mindset of like what was possible. And what I discovered as I was getting older, even when I became a teacher, is I would sometimes believe there were limits that didn't even exist. Like, you know how sometimes you create rules for yourself that don't exist. And so I think that once I started figuring out that for me, the person's permission that I needed first was my own, then I began to, again, break free from that restriction that I was pushing against sometimes, or the binary that sometimes I was creating for myself, and was able to begin to step into some other potential. So I know that's not answering the question directly, Jen or Mike, but I just want to start there because I think that it's so important for people to recognize that when you know what you want to do next, giving yourself permission to move gives you power and imagination to take the next step.
I
Let's explore that a little bit more if we can. Do
Yeah,
you
let's
mind?
do it.
How do you coach people to figure out what they want? Because I think sometimes, again, like, many of us have only ever worked in schools, so it's very narrow. So is it, just a bunch of reflection? Is it ask other people what they think you're good at? Or,
Mhm.
how do you get people there?
Well, let me give you an example. So, several weeks ago, I had a phone call, well, a Zoom meeting with a teacher who's finishing a master's degree in education leadership. And she had reached out to me because she was stuck, and was just kind of, knew my podcast, but was just kind of stuck with like what to do next. So we stepped into a conversation. And in that conversation, Mike, I asked her, okay, tell me what you currently are doing and what you love about it. So she did. She was currently teaching, but also doing some instructional coaching as a part of her duties. I asked her, okay, based on you have this new degree, what's something that you think you may want to do in addition to that? And she was like, well, I'm thinking about, you know, the, in my school, an assistant principal would be like the next thing that I could do with that degree area. So I told her, okay, well, tell me what you would like about that work and what you wouldn't like about that work, and she did. And I said, if I'm coming back to that thing we had talked about earlier. I was like, so if money was off the table, or if fear of failure was off the table, what's something else you'd love to do? And she was like, man, I would really love to expand more coaching with teachers because it's only a part of my work right now, but it's something that I would just really love to do more of because it just brings me so much joy and I see how much it's helping them. And so I was like, okay, well, let's create some pathways, potentials for all three of these things and see which of them opens up doors for you. And this isn't somebody I was going to coach on an ongoing basis. It was just a one-time call. So a couple of weeks later, she actually lives in our community. So she ran into my wife and she was telling my wife, hey, by the way, I haven't called Will, but I have just been chewing on these pathways and I couldn't get out of this thought of how much more I would love to do instructional coaching. So I went to my principal and just said, I've got the potential now to move on or do something different or apply for these other positions. But this has become such a passion. Is there any way within the structure that we currently have that I could do more coaching with teachers? And of course, because he's a leader that didn't want to lose a really great teacher and he was able to recognize the potential and the resources, he's developed an entire new trajectory for her for next year, where she's going to get to do a whole lot more teacher coaching than she was previously. So I know that doesn't answer your question directly, Mike, but I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is those same questions that I ask her. What's something you're currently doing that you enjoy to do and would love to do more? What's something that might be a second next best step for you? And something that she told my wife that I thought was funny too is that she said the more she explored the options, the more she realized she didn't really want to be an assistant principal. Like the
Well,
things that
and
were,
that's what I was going to ask you,
yes,
right? Like,
yeah,
how much of this
hmm
thinking is think about the stuff you put off, think about
hmm
the stuff you hate doing about your
hmm
current job,
yeah,
and then think about how to do the stuff you like.
yes,
Which sounds easy for people, I'm what, 4 years away from retirement. So that's easy for me to say, right? Because I'm staring at a pension. I can do whatever I want in 4 years. But what about people who are more mid-career? Because
hmm
that's like the inflection point for so many people. Because in order to make it worthwhile to make that transition to being an administrator these days, you almost have to go early in your career. Otherwise, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to work another 2 months out of the year and not get paid that much more money. Like how do you kind of coach those folks who may feel like they have more to lose or more that's holding them in the current
hmm
situation?
Um, well, you want to do a quick practice together, Mike?
You're killing me. Yes, go.
Okay, we're gonna do an abbreviated version, and this is a model that I learned from uh, another coach. Her name is Sam Horn. She's got a book called The Happiness Box. I love to do this with myself and with other leaders. So we'll do this for listeners. So you're gonna have to think out loud. Okay. So we're gonna think in four categories because these four categories are gonna be the doing, not doing, want to do, and don't want to do. Okay, are you ready?
Okay.
So category one, doing. What are you doing right now in work or life that you want to do? You just love it.
Uh, Presenting, like learning new things and teaching them to large groups of people,
Okay, I love that. Oh,
talking to interesting people and
mhm,
learning about what they do.
mhm. Okay, so you love to present, you love to learn new things, you love to teach, you love working with large groups. What are some things, so category two, that you're not doing, but you want to be doing?
Hmm.
Or maybe you're not doing as much as you want to be.
Not doing, but want to be doing. Well, I mean, is it just career related
It can
or
be life or work.
see, that's the thing. I would love to do more things outdoors,
Mm,
more things that are physically active that
mm.
make my body feel good.
Oh, I love that. So you would love to spend more time outdoors, physically act. Just give me outside.
Yep.
Let me do those things that I love outside. Awesome. All right, category three. What are you currently doing that you don't want to be doing?
Oh, anything related to details of day-to-day operations, email,
hmm
HR stuff, budget,
hmm
anything like that, things that we have to get competent at as administrators, but that I would just prefer not to do.
Yeah, calendars, all
All
that
that
stuff. Oh,
nonsense.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, okay. And then category four. What are you not doing in your life, and you're glad you're not doing it? Now, this may be something you used to do, and you're so glad you no longer do it. And like, for example, maybe you used to smoke and now you don't. But
Let's see. That's a good one. I work in an educational service agency, and one of the things that I really like about that is that, we don't have the same interaction with a community or voters or things like that, where I have other folks that I have to respond to and work with, but not that piece. And I,
yeah.
I, I don't miss student discipline. I don't
hmm
miss
hmm
employee discipline, like things like that, ugh,
Yeah. So you're really glad that you're in a position where you can still support the work, but you're not dealing with as much conflict as you did. And especially when it comes in, and I was an AP for 9 years. I don't miss student discipline.
ugh.
And so that's something I always put down on my list. So here's the thing. So listeners, you may be taking mental notes for yourself. When you think about those four categories, doing, not doing, want to do, don't want to do, there's there's a there's a tension between your not doing and don't want to do. So, so in other words, you would love to be able to spend more time outdoors doing physical activities, being more active. You really wish you were doing less emails, HR, budgets, calendars, and those kinds of things too. And here's what I've discovered is that, and this doesn't always work because when you're comparing life and work, it's not always these tensions don't always play on each other this way. But in general, the more things you can get off of that three, that things I wish I was no longer doing, the more it frees you up to be able to start doing things that you want to. And so let me take that back to my years as a principal. When I recognize that, like, there's no way I can actually be out in classrooms and be observing teachers unless I can train someone else to manage those phone calls that are coming in, or to be my tier one, tier two responders to these things that I don't need to be answering. I can train somebody else to answer those things. Once I began to train other people to do that for me, then it freed me up to do the things only I could do. But even in the work I'm doing now, like consulting full time, I realized like I was no longer wanting to edit my own podcast or manage my own
Yep.
calendar all the time or do my own invoicing. So I hired an assistant and trained her to begin to do those things for me and meet with me on a regular basis to kind of walk me through the things that I should only be working on so she could handle the things that she could do to free me up to do more of the things only I can do. So there's a tension in all these questions, Mike, which I think we can all regularly visit because I do this practice to myself every year. And I think when we visit those practices over time, it becomes a little more obvious to us where I can begin to make some movement or where I can begin to tweak things to give myself permission to do more of the things that I want to be doing. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I just want to
Oh
use
yeah,
that.
that was great. Well, I am my own favorite topic. So I appreciate that. Well, this has been, we want to be sensitive to your time. This has been just a fantastic conversation. And I hope more folks pick up your book and reflect on all of these questions and all 20 chapters. And, just it is kind of cool to think bigger about what you're doing because I think we get so mired in the day-to-day stuff that we forget there's a lot out there.
There is. And you guys are so generous. Thank you. And I know in the book, Jen, you mentioned this at the top of the conversation that I do tell a lot of stories. I'm a storyteller. But I tried to make it both something that was conversational because these are the kinds of conversations that it's usually when you're walking alongside a friend that you'll open up and say, this has really been on my mind. So I want to invite readers to trust me. And then but I also wanted to just share, just like you and I did, Mike, some of those things that I regularly practice as reflective tools or ideas or mapping. I do a whole chapter on backward mapping. I share my own resume, just all the things that become pieces of that as you're planning and thinking ahead. Because if I could help one person to just feel like they've given themselves permission to dream and inquire and allow yourself to have the joy you did as a kid when you're discovering something new, give yourself permission to have that joy now. You're never too old to delight in the potential pathways in front of us.
We invite everyone to walk alongside Will as you read his book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love. We'll put some contact information in the show notes so you know where to find Will. And thank you so much for taking the time. It really has been so great to see you and talk to you.
Thank you, guys.